In this video, we're going to talk about the Greek civilization, and the Greek civilization is the start of the classical era. And the classical era is like a 1300-year-long period, which started with the poetry of Homer. Homer was a Greek poet. He was a Greek author and a Greek poet, and his poetry is the start of classical era and Greek civilization, and it ended with the decline of the Western Roman Empire. So when we're talking about the Greek civilization, the first thing I'm going to say is the city-states, and these were called the poleis. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but anyways, that's the plural for polis. A polis is a city-state, and if you haven't heard the word before, it means that these were kind of like an urban area surrounded by an agricultural area, and in the urban area, that's where the inhabitants lived, while they got their food from the agricultural area surrounding the urban area. So yes, and the urban area was often also centered around a acropolis, and acro means high, polis means city-state or city. And the acropolises were these high hills with sacred buildings on them. So that's what the urban area was centered around. And one thing to remember about Greek civilization is that these Greek polis, Greece wasn't a unified state, and these polis were independent political communities of citizens, right? And citizens for them is not how we would describe a citizen today. Only 10% of their population were citizens, and people who could be citizens were free, they were adult, and they were males. So women, children, slaves, and foreigners could not become citizens. Yeah, they had, people who were citizens had to have a Greek father, or a Greek father with the citizenship. That's how it traveled. That's how it got inherited. So yeah, that's a bit about the citizenship. And the agora and the social life. So in the agora, there were a lot of buildings which could both be for entertainment purposes or for political purposes. That's where people came to vote. That's where people came to discuss political issues. That's where the public offices were, and that's where religious festivals were held. The agora had designated areas for all of these, and as for entertainment, it also had theaters and gymnasiums and things where people could enjoy themselves and relax a little bit. But this wasn't exclusively for the citizens. Different people could come here, but I think women had to be a bit careful because they could get molested, and if they were molested, their husband had the right to divorce them. So yeah, women had to be a bit careful in Greek society. But that also varied from polis to polis. Yeah, that's a bit about that. So even though Greece was a collection of different polis, they still had a unified culture. They had some similarities amongst them, and that had to do with their art, with their religion, with their gods, with their religious rituals, with their architecture, with their alphabet, with their with their political systems. Even though they did not all have the same political institutions and the same political systems, not all of them were democracies, but still there was like similarity, and there was like a thread between all of that. Yes, that's a bit about politics. And and one very important thing, you've heard of the Olympic Games, right? And that had to do with one of their gods, the most important of gods. And the Olympics was not only an athletic festival, but it was also a religious festival, and that's where all of Greece would meet. Not all people, of course, but people from all of the different polis would come to Olympia, and they would celebrate and meet. So you can see that even though they're politically autonomous, independent communities in the polis, there's still like this sense of commonness or unification. And the Olympics were actually held every 4th year for 1,000 years. Yes, it's a very, very long period of time that they were held for. So factors behind the establishment of Greece, and that there are 3 factors that I'm going to discuss in this video. And the first one, of course, with every civilization, there has to be something to do with agriculture. And this region where where ancient Greece was located is very fertile, so they could grow food. And once they grew food, obviously the population was going to increase. And once the population increased, they had to find resources, new resources, and that's where the Greeks were very good. The Greeks were very good at sailing, and that meant that they could spread themselves in search for resources, and they did it very nicely. So if you look at the map of Greece at that time, you can see that it's a very huge area. It's way bigger than Greece is right now, and that had to do with the fact that they were able to spread themselves because of their ability at sea. There were 1,000 different poleis in Greece at that time, and it covered like a very huge area. And the third most important factor for the establishment of Greece was iron, because iron is a very important metal. It can be used to make weapons for protection, and it can be used to make tools for agriculture. So both it helped them, the extraction of iron and the use of iron helped them both with protection and with food. So political development, I'm going to discuss political development next. And democracy consists of course, two words, which you already know that probably, which together imply the rule of the people. So democracy is, the birthplace of democracy is Athens. So initially the polis were, they had these rulers. They were ruled by kings and rulers, but if the kings infringed their rights, if they did something that the people did not like, they would rally behind a tyrant who would offer them better rights, and if the tyrant didn't do that, then they would rally behind another tyrant. So that's part of the story behind the development of their political system, but also their soldiers actually gained political influence, and that had to do with the fact that soldiers had to finance their armors themselves, and that meant that they were required to have a regular income, which meant that they had to be landowners. And when they were landowners and soldiers and more powerful than other people were in different civilizations, that meant that they were able to participate in politics because they had more influence. What about the political institutions? And there were two main political institutions in Athens, in Greek polis, and that was actually a common feature with all of Greek polis. And these two institutions were the assembly, the ecclesia, and the council. And in Athens it's known as the Council of the 500. I don't know if it's known as that in all of the polis. Yeah, and I'll talk a bit about these in the next video, but I'm not going to say a lot about them in this video. So yeah, that's how the society was in Greek polises. Polis. So now we're going to talk about the Persian Wars, which was a very important part of Greek history, or ancient Greek history. And so yeah, where do we start? The Persian Empire in 500 BC was actually the greatest empire in the world, and they were wanting to expand into Europe, and they already had subjugated some Greek polis, and they had their eyes on rest of Greece, and some polis in Asia Minor, which is modern day Turkey. They stood up against the Persian Empire, and were supported by Sparta and Athens, the two mightiest of the Greek polis, or poleis, the plural for polis. And so when they stood up and were supported, the Persians didn't like that, because, you know, as I've mentioned, Greece wasn't really unified, so they were probably thinking that, they aren't even unified, how will they defend themselves? But they saw that now they're kind of like supporting each other, so they probably didn't like that, and so they attacked in 490 BC, and the Battle of Marathon was held outside of Athens, and the Persian army had around 90,000 men, while the Greek army, the Athenian army, only had around 20,000 men. But miraculously, the Athenians won, And yeah, and that's where the word marathon comes from, by the way. I'm not going to get into that, but you can remember that's where the word marathon comes from. Yeah, so they won, but 10 years later the Persians would return, and so they attacked again via the pass of Thermopylae. Yeah, and 300 Spartan men or warriors, soldiers, tried to hold the gigantic Persian army on the pass, but of course there were 300, and so every single soldier of the Spartan army was killed. And then Athens was sacked, and Greeks, they realized that they had to unify themselves, so they did that, and then they won a naval battle on the island of Salamis. But again, obviously the Persians didn't give up, and this was just a naval battle. The Persian cavalry was still very much in good shape, so they attacked again, and yeah, but again they lost. The Greeks won again. So yeah, that's how Greece was able to maintain its independence. And then there's something really interesting that happens, but I'm not going to talk a lot about it. After the Greeks saw that they had won the Persian wars, they were still afraid of future threats, so they formed a defense alliance called the Delian League, and that's where Athens became very mighty. They gained a lot of influence, and Sparta didn't like the fact that they gained that much influence, so they withdrew from the Delian League. Instead, they reformed an older alliance called the Peloponnese Alliance. And yeah, so when Sparta withdrew from Athens, from the Delian League, obviously Athens was unchallenged now, and they became very mighty, and that's the golden age of Athens, that period of time. So then Athens actually misused the Delian League to their advantage, and obviously that made them unpopular amongst other poleis. And not only did it make them unpopular, they also came into conflicts with other poleis, and that weakened Athens, and later resulted in the end of the golden age and the dominance of Athens. And if you want to learn more about Athens and Sparta, which is again a very interesting topic, then you should watch my next video.